You're very welcome back to Ireland Day. Now, normal services resume at Dublin Airport after a Terminal 2 security evacuation. Here to go through today's news is Fergus Finlay from the Irish Examiner, Saoirse Hanley from the Irish Independent, and News Talk's Henry McKean. But first, travel journalist Eoghan Corry joins us down the line. Eoghan, thank you so much for joining us today. I suppose interesting time for air travellers, to say the least.
Yeah, you know, you're waiting for the bus to show and nothing shows up and you're sitting on the plane and then two come together. We had two big crises within a couple of hours of each other yesterday. Cyber attack, uneven the effect. The real impact there was on Brussels, followed by Berlin and followed by Heathrow. But then we lost 90 minutes of service in Dublin Airport. It was mid-afternoon and it could have been a lot worse if it had been early morning. But yesterday we're looking at 13 cancellations yesterday, mostly outbound, and the knock-on is still there because we've 10 cancellations in Dublin today, mainly inbound.
What do we know about what actually happened yesterday in that whole security scare?
Collins Aerospace, very big company. They have a very big presence in Shannon, Cork, and indeed in Dublin as well. They do all sorts of services for aviation. That automated check-in, you know, that little beep, beep, as you're at the gate, and they're checking in all those boarding passes, reading them. That's all their technology. Now, the technology seemed to have been attacked quite comprehensively, but they managed to isolate it fairly quickly because Brussels was the first to be attacked, and it meant that the bigger airports in Europe are largely protected. A little bit of a knock-on effect in Dublin, but it's still there. Like, we've lost the EI 630. Fergus would be familiar with that, the flight to Brussels, and the EI 154 to Heathrow already this morning have been cancelled, and the return flights from that. So that's related to the cyber security. The other cancellations in Dublin are all related to the evacuation. We've lost the outbound Minneapolis and the inbound Philadelphia, Washington, Indianapolis and Chicago. They were flights that couldn't take off yesterday during that terminal closure. So, you know, even though we're over the crisis from an aviation point of view, from an airline point of view, and from a passenger point of view, still a lot of mopping up to be done, Elaine.
That is so true, because even one flight cancellation, if it's a serious one, can have knock-on throughout the day. But this has gone into the second day, and of course the suspect device was seen as to be safe. But a lot of passengers were left high and dry yesterday.
Yeah, it's a big deal because a transatlantic flight is a much bigger loss than a Heathrow or a Brussels. You can generally work your way around. Aviation's good at mopping up. It's very expensive and it's messy. And of course, some of the fans are already arriving for the big Minnesota Vikings Pittsburgh Steelers match next week on that Minneapolis flight. But aviation is good. Within 24 hours, we'll have it back. I noticed Brussels today also asking airlines to cancel some of today's flights. What happened really was, and passengers be very familiar with what used to happen before the digital age. Everything was done manually, lots of pieces of paper. Very hard to go back to that, but they were able to do it. Quite an achievement. The Brussels, as I said, the main impact, 140 flights. Most of the other airports were able to cope with back to manual check-in. The old pen and paper, Elaine, you can't beat it.
You can't, but unfortunately, Eoghan, I don't think we'll be going back to those days anytime soon. Thank you so much for joining us this morning with that update into the aviation chaos, really, that almost happened yesterday.